Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. For decades, the cultural narrative surrounding automation and artificial intelligence has been dominated by a singular, seductive promise: the liberation of human time. From the mid-20th century visions of a hyper-leisure society to the breathless keynote presentations of modern Silicon Valley executives, the pitch has remained remarkably consistent. We were told that by delegating the mundane, repetitive, and time-consuming tasks to machines, human beings would be freed to engage in higher-order, creative, and strategic thinking. We would push a button, the algorithm would do the heavy lifting, and we would reclaim our cognitive bandwidth to focus on what truly matters. Yet, as we navigate the realities of the modern workplace in the late 2020s, a radically different picture has emerged. Rather than basking in the glow of a shortened workweek and unprecedented mental clarity, today's workforce is reporting record levels of burnout, exhaustion, and cognitive overload. The machines are indeed doing the work, but human beings are working harder than ever to manage the machines. This phenomenon is not a temporary glitch in the matrix, or a mere growing pain of technological adoption. It is a fundamental structural feature of how human-machine interaction functions. It is known as the automation paradox, and understanding it is the absolute key to surviving the artificial intelligence revolution without sacrificing our collective sanity. To truly understand the modern AI paradox, we have to look back more than 4 decades to a foundational piece of cognitive psychology. The year is 1983. A researcher named Lisanne Bainbridge published a highly influential paper titled Ironies of Automation. At the time, Bainbridge was observing the rapid automation of industrial processes, looking closely at places like chemical plants and aviation systems. Engineers were designing automated systems to handle routine operations because, quite simply, machines were deemed more reliable and less error-prone than human operators. But Bainbridge noticed a glaring, counterintuitive flaw in this approach, a flaw she perfectly termed an irony. The irony of automation is that by automating the easiest, most predictable parts of a job, system designers inadvertently leave the human operator with an arbitrary collection of the most complex, unpredictable, and cognitively demanding tasks. Think about it. When a machine functions perfectly 99% of the time, the human is relegated to the role of a passive monitor. You just sit there and watch. However, human beings are neurologically unsuited to maintain effective visual and mental attention on a highly reliable system where nothing happens for long periods. Our brains are wired for stimulation and pattern recognition, not endless vigilance over static dials. This leads to a severe condition known as monitoring fatigue. When the automated system inevitably encounters a novel situation it cannot handle, it abruptly hands control back to the human. The human operator, who has been passively monitoring and is now totally out of the loop in terms of situational awareness, is suddenly forced to intervene in a highly complex crisis with zero runway. They go from 0 to 100 in a fraction of a second, completely lacking the contextual buildup that would have prepared them to solve the problem. Today, Bainbridge's industrial observations have migrated from the factory floor and the airplane cockpit straight into our laptops and white-collar workflows. We have applied agentic AI and large language models to coding, writing, data analysis, and legal research. But the core irony remains entirely unresolved. The more we rely on AI to do the work, the more cognitive strain we place on the human responsible for evaluating it. The primary reason AI amplifies cognitive workload lies in the fundamental difference between generating work and evaluating work. Historically, a professional's cognitive load was distributed across a timeline. If you were tasked with writing a comprehensive market research report, your brain would naturally pace itself. You would outline the structure, gather your data, write a terrible first draft, refine it, and finally polish it. This intrinsic cognitive load is highly demanding, yes, but it is a familiar rhythm that humans have evolved to manage. The process of creation builds an internal mental model. By the time you finish writing that report, you intimately understand every nuance of the data, the logical flow of the argument, and the context of the conclusions. Enter generative AI. Now, you prompt an AI, and within 10 seconds, it spits out a polished, 5,000-word market research report. The generative phase has been compressed to near zero. But your job is no longer to write the report. Your job is to verify it. This introduces what experts call the Babysitter Effect. You are now managing a highly confident, incredibly articulate, but occasionally hallucinatory digital intern. You must carefully read every single sentence, fact-check every statistic, and ensure the tone aligns perfectly with your company's brand. Cognitive load theory dictates that this type of continuous verification and contextual evaluation spikes what is known as extraneous cognitive load. This is the mental effort required to process poorly designed or overwhelmingly dense information. It turns out that untangling the subtle logical leaps and plausible-sounding falsehoods of an AI model requires vastly more acute, concentrated mental energy than simply writing the document yourself. You are no longer engaging in the steady marathon of creation. You are forced into a high-stakes sprint of intense auditing. And the friction between the promise of AI and the reality of its implementation is becoming glaringly apparent in global workforce data. C-suite executives are investing billions into AI integration, driven by an overwhelming expectation of efficiency. According to recent data from the Upwork Research Institute, 96% of C-suite leaders expect AI to significantly boost worker productivity. But the view from the trenches is starkly different. In that exact same study, 77% of employees using AI reported that these tools had actually added to their workload. Employees found themselves spending massive amounts of time reviewing and moderating AI-generated content, accounting for 39% of their new tasks. They spent 23% of their time just learning how to navigate constantly changing tools, and 21% dealing with an overall increase in demands from management who simply assumed I was making them faster. This phenomenon was beautifully captured in an embedded study conducted by researchers from UC Berkeley and Yale in 2026, which tracked the voluntary adoption of generative AI at a tech company. The researchers identified a paradox they termed workload creep. Because AI made new tasks feel instantly achievable, the overall scope of what an employee was expected to accomplish expanded exponentially. If AI saves you 2 hours a day on writing emails or summarizing documents, your employer does not give you those 2 hours back to rest or think creatively. Instead, they expect you to take on an entirely new project. Consequently, workers became objectively more capable, but simultaneously more exhausted. Perhaps the most fascinating illustration of this cognitive dissonance comes from a 2025 study by METR involving software developers. When developers used AI tools to write code, they actually took 19% longer to complete their tasks compared to working entirely manually. The overhead of reviewing, testing, and ultimately rejecting subpar AI-generated code consumed far more time than it saved. In fact, developers accepted less than 44% of the AI suggestions. Yet, the human perception of AI is deeply distorted by its speed. When surveyed after the experiment, those exact same developers confidently stated they believed the AI had made them 20% faster. There was a staggering 39 percentage point gap between their perceived productivity and their actual, measured reality. We are so dazzled by the speed at which AI produces text or code that our brains simply fail to account for the exhausting hours we spend cleaning up its mess. As we offload more of our cognitive heavy lifting to algorithms, we run headfirst into another dangerous facet of the automation paradox, the erosion of human skill, or the deskilling dilemma. Bainbridge highlighted back in 1983 that to successfully monitor an automated system, the human operator must possess an expert-level mental model of what the correct output should look like. You cannot effectively correct an AI's legal brief unless you are an expert lawyer who knows the case law inside and out. You cannot debug an AI's software architecture unless you are a master engineer who understands system dependencies. But here is the massive catch. How does one become a master? Mastery is forged in the crucible of routine, repetitive, and sometimes mundane work. Junior employees learn the intricacies of their profession by doing the very tasks that are now being eagerly handed over to AI. If an AI drafts all the initial code, writes all the first drafts, and synthesizes all the research, junior workers are entirely deprived of the fundamental learning loops necessary to build expertise. This creates a terrifying long-term vulnerability within organizations known as the expert as observer paradox. We are relying on AI to do the work, and relying on senior experts to supervise the AI. But because the AI is doing all the foundational work, we are actively preventing the next generation of workers from developing the expertise required to supervise the AI of the future. Over-reliance on automation gradually erodes the user's confidence in their own basic abilities, leading to a deskilling loop where human workers defer to the machine simply because they no longer trust their own judgment. But the amplification of cognitive workload and the erosion of skill are only one half of the equation. The other half is the profound emotional and social toll of human-AI collaboration. Evaluating interactions through the lens of traditional technostress usually focuses on digital overload, but AI introduces entirely new psychological dynamics to the workplace. A 2025 study on human-AI collaboration fatigue highlights that AI acts not just as a tool, but as an autonomous component in decision-making. When employees interact primarily with a machine, rather than human colleagues, they experience a sharp reduction in interpersonal interaction. This heavily contributes to profound workplace loneliness and emotional strain. According to the conservation of resources theory, human beings possess a finite pool of emotional and cognitive resources. Dealing with the unpredictability of AI, the lack of algorithmic transparency, and the underlying fear of professional displacement known as techno-insecurity actively depletes these resources at an alarming rate. As employees collaborate more with their AI colleagues, their communication with actual human peers inevitably decreases. This loneliness directly feeds into emotional fatigue, which in turn has been scientifically shown to increase counterproductive work behaviors. Furthermore, the burnout metrics associated with top AI adopters are nothing short of staggering. Upwork's 2025 data revealed that while AI can generate a 40% boost in productivity for adept users, it comes at a devastating cost. 88% of those highly productive AI users reported experiencing severe burnout, and they were twice as likely to consider quitting compared to peers who used AI less frequently. The employees achieving the very productivity gains that the C-suite demands are simultaneously becoming massive flight risks for the company. They feel disconnected from broader organizational strategies, effectively turning into hyper-efficient, highly isolated islands of output. So the ultimate question is it possible to escape the automation paradox? Can we harness the immense power of artificial intelligence without frying our cognitive circuits and burning out our best talent? Interestingly, early indicators of a healthy, sustainable relationship with AI are emerging not from traditional corporate environments, but from the independent workforce. Research indicates that freelancers and independent professionals are modeling a vastly healthier dynamic with artificial intelligence. Unlike full-time employees, who often have AI thrust upon them alongside increased corporate quotas, freelancers possess complete autonomy over their workflows. Nearly 90% of freelancers report that AI has a positive impact on their work. The crucial difference is how they use it. Rather than using AI merely as a mass production engine to crank out more deliverables, freelancers frequently use AI as a learning partner. 90% of freelancers use AI to acquire new skills faster, and 42% credit it with helping them specialize in niche markets. Because independent professionals control their own pace, boundaries, and tools, they do not suffer from the same workload creep imposed by middle management. They leverage AI to augment their capabilities and improve the quality of their offerings, rather than just indiscriminately increasing the quantity of their output. This autonomous, boundary-driven approach serves as a vital blueprint for how traditional organizations must restructure their expectations if they want to survive the AI transition. To resolve the automation paradox on a systemic level, a fundamental shift must occur in both the design of AI systems and the management of human talent. First, we must completely abandon the black box approach to artificial intelligence. System transparency and explainability are absolutely paramount. As Bainbridge noted way back in the 80s, for humans to effectively monitor an automated process, they must understand the system's inner workings and decision-making logic. Human-in-the-loop systems are currently failing because humans are brought into the loop only to rubber stamp an output they cannot reverse engineer or comprehend. We need a massive shift toward cognitive computing and interactive AI, where the machine is designed to communicate its reasoning bidirectionally with the human, acting as a genuine teammate rather than a silent oracle that just drops a finished product on your desk. Second, organizations must completely rethink their productivity metrics. Introducing revolutionary AI technology into outdated, rigid industrial-era work models is a recipe for catastrophic burnout. If an AI tool saves an employee 10 hours a week, management absolutely cannot immediately fill those 10 hours with more low-level tasks. That reclaimed time must be strategically allocated toward rest, human collaboration, and germane cognitive load. Germane cognitive load is the essential mental effort required to actually learn, synthesize new schemas, and maintain true expertise. Productivity and well-being can no longer be treated as adversarial trade-offs in the boardroom. They must be viewed as deeply symbiotic. Finally, we must recognize the irreplaceable value of human intuition. While AI operates as a rapid pattern recognition engine, human intuition relies on complex, lived experience, contextual nuance, and profound ethical judgment. Over-reliance on automation deeply neglects the unique, unquantifiable value humans contribute to complex problem-solving. The automation paradox teaches us a deeply humbling lesson. Technology does not eliminate work, it transforms its nature. Artificial intelligence will not free us from cognitive effort. On the contrary, by stripping away the easy, repetitive tasks, AI distills human work down to its most potent, concentrated, and mentally taxing essence. We are stepping into a new era, where our primary professional currency will no longer be our ability to produce information, but our capacity to evaluate, contextualize, and direct it. Navigating this immense shift requires immense mental stamina. If we blindly chase efficiency at the expense of human cognitive limits, we will inevitably build a workforce of exhausted, de-skilled babysitters, watching over machines they no longer fully understand. But if we acknowledge the paradox, if we intentionally design systems for human-AI collaboration, protect our emotional resources, and prioritize the pursuit of true mastery over the illusion of speed, we can transcend the ironies of automation once and for all. We can build a future where AI does not just amplify our workload, but genuinely elevates our cognitive potential. Thank you for tuning in to Fun Facts Online, sharing the deepest dives into the science shaping our world.